Welcome everybody. We'll get started now. If people come on in, they can just find a seat. For those that don't know me, I'm Matt Harrington. I'm the director of the Southwestern Vermont Chamber of Commerce. But the Chamber also plays a huge role in destination marketing with our brand Shires of Southwestern Vermont. So, kind of found it important and critical for me to be here to moderate some of the questions we have for tonight for our panelists. Just some housekeeping. First, we kind of have a group of questions that we'll ask the panelists, and then, before we're done here, we'll open up for all of you. If you have questions for our panelists, bathrooms, if you don't know, are through that hallway and then downstairs to your right. So please feel free if you need to at any point go there. And then just one more note on this series. You're in the second part of a three-part series called Critical Connections. The last one is October 28th, and we'll focus on Vermont and the opioid epidemic. So with that, I want to thank the Bennington Museum for hosting us and our panelists here, as well as board members. If you're a board member of the Bennington Museum, just raise your hand. Great. Thank you guys for serving. And then finally, support from Peckham Industries for having this. So our panelists, and I'm not going to read through their bio, but I will introduce them and encourage them to read or give us kind of a background of how they got to where they are today. First, we have Commissioner Heather Pelham. She's the Commissioner of the Vermont Department of Marketing and Tourism. We have Molly Mahar, President of Ski Vermont. We have Nathan McKean, Director of State Parks, Vermont Department of Forest, Parks and Recreation. And finally, but not least, Amy Spear, Vice President of Tourism with the Vermont Chamber of Commerce. So with that, I'm going to start with you, Commissioner Pelham. Just give us a little bit of a background and how you got to that specific seat tonight.
Sure. Well, I can start with the fact that I took a beautiful drive down Route 7 today. Beautiful sunny afternoon, peak foliage, so that was wonderful. I live in Randolph Center, so it's really a joy. But in terms of my professional background, I have been the Commissioner of the Department of Tourism Marketing since 2019. Previous to that, I was within the Agency of Commerce and Community Development and served as the Chief Marketing Officer for about 6 years. And previous to that, I had a private marketing and design firm here in Vermont. So I've been in the marketing space for, I don't want to add that up, for a while, but thrilled to be holding the reins at the Department of Tourism. It's been a very interesting couple of years for sure, and tourism is so central to Vermont and our brand and our economy that it's just a real pleasure to be taking that responsibility.
Thank you. Molly?
Sure. I'm Molly Mahar. I am president of the Vermont Ski Areas Association, also known as Ski Vermont. We are a nonprofit trade association for the alpine and cross-country ski areas across the state. We have 20 alpine members and almost 40 cross-country members. And we're based in Montpelier. We have a staff of 4, and we serve our members in governmental affairs, public relations, public affairs, and marketing. We've also been working in workforce development, paying attention to housing, diversity, equity, inclusion, just trying to really, find any way that we can support our members. And my background is really ski industry. I'm not a policy person per se, although I've kind of reinvented myself into that with this new role. I've been with the association since 2018, and prior to that I held sales, marketing, communication roles at different ski areas in Vermont and also out of state. I'm happy to be here. Thanks for the invitation.
Okay. Nate?
Thank you. My name is Nate McKean. I'm the Director of Vermont State Parks. We have 55 amazing state parks spread around through every corner of the state, and some very nice parks close to Bennington here. And I've served as the Director for about a little over 2 years now, and I was in the Peace Corps in the early 90s. When I returned, I moved to Vermont and worked in the ski industry and started as a seasonal park manager. And since then, I've had a variety of jobs within the Forest Parks and Recreation Department, mostly with state parks, but some with state forests. And I have to say, this museum is amazing. I've driven by and stopped outside when you were open, to use the bathroom. And the kids have clambered around outside, but I've never been in. And I'm really very impressed with the state parks exhibit upstairs. So, very nice. Oh, and I'd like to add, sorry, that we're creeping up on 1.1 million visitors this year, which is close to an all-time record for the Parks Division.
Last but not least, right, so that, Matt?
Yes, that's what I said.
So Amy Spear, I'm the Vice President of Tourism with the Vermont Chamber of Commerce. My journey actually started in the museum world. I worked in fundraising and event planning at the Albany Institute of History and Art, which some of you might know since we're almost neighbors. And then I was at the New Bedford Whaling Museum prior to coming to Vermont, where I ran marketing and events for the town of Killington in their Marketing and Economic Development Office. Director of the Killington Chamber before I went to be the Executive Director at the Stowe Area Association, which serves as the DMO for Stowe, Vermont. And then I landed at the Vermont Chamber and have been there for about 3 years now.
Great. Well, welcome everybody. Thank you for taking time out of your Friday afternoon, and all of you are guests here on a Friday afternoon, a beautiful fall Friday afternoon in Bennington. Let's go right to the elephant in the room with the first question, and I'm going to start with you, Molly. How has the pandemic impacted travel and tourism? And I'll put a spin on this because we know it has impacted it, but in surprising ways, in maybe improvements that we don't really know about, or maybe things that now are here to stay. And I'll start with you, Molly, but we'll give a chance for the whole panelists to answer.
Sure. I would say that the pandemic has really been a catalyst for businesses to adopt technology. Certainly in the ski industry, that's been a trend and was a trend pre-pandemic. But it really forced areas to accelerate that, and some more than others, I would say. But things like being able to buy tickets ahead of time. Certainly we had some things in place during the pandemic that we had to limit ticket sales, so it really accelerated those types of things. And that translates into more efficiency for guests going forward. So if you can buy your ticket ahead of time online, you don't have to stand online. You don't have to stand in line at a ticket window, when you could be out skiing. So I would say that. We've also seen improvements in outside spaces, because obviously outside was the place to be during the pandemic, and so people were really limiting their indoor time, and so just making outdoor spaces a little bit more comfortable with things like windbreaks, fire pits, those types of things, and I think that's here to stay as well. Just one last thing I would say is it also has shifted some of the visitation patterns that we've seen, more midweek use of season passes, for example, which, I kind of joke with my board that, it only took a pandemic to get people to ski midweek, right? We've been trying to figure that out for, forever. And it'll be interesting to see how that stays, because we've seen a little bit of a creep back to weekends, and certainly a lot of people still visit on weekends, but with remote work and people having a little bit more latitude with their schedules in some cases, they can visit at different times to ski and snowboard.
Great. And we'll go right down the row. So Nate.
Thanks. Yeah, with state parks, it was just a huge boom really for outdoor recreation, and the first year of the pandemic and some of the second year really allowed Vermonters to rediscover their state park system and their trails and all that's available on state land. And I think it really made us a lot stronger. We stood up some technology, made some changes that really we probably wouldn't have done right away, but we ended up doing it out of necessity. Teleworking, technological advancements, a reservation system, touchless rentals, some of the things that Molly was mentioning. We hire 450 seasonal employees every year, so that's been quite a challenge, but it's also been a strength of ours. We bring in a lot of folks from out of state, and some of them end up staying, so that's been a positive, even more so with the pandemic. Really, I think the biggest thing is just the explosion and demand for people being outdoors and recognizing the health and mental health and wellness benefits of that. And so we're, like I said, we're approaching a record year with state parks and on our trails and state forests. There are many trailheads that are full still, and if you come down Route 9 from Brattleboro, you'll often see cars parked along the side of the road at Molly Stark State Park. So people are getting outdoors. So I think that's the biggest change for us.
Yeah, I think I would say that, one of the insights that came out of the pandemic is also just a reaffirmation of what we know about the Vermont brand, that, everybody wanted to get outside, and they wanted to do so with a little bit of space between each other. I'm not sure we're quite 6 feet apart here, but, we were ready to take advantage of that, which was a wonderful thing. There was a lot of pain involved in that, and a lot of, we have calculated just, primarily over $1 billion in losses economically from the pandemic. But in terms of what it means for us going forward, the Vermont brand and being so associated with spending time in the outdoors, that's certainly here to stay. I would say that, Nate kind of mentioned some of this, but, for us, the Department of Tourism, looking at residents is also one of our target audiences and really encouraging folks to get in and around the state. So when people couldn't fly to Europe or to any other destination, we really saw people focusing in on what was closer to home. And so, making sure we keep those lessons in mind. I think we also saw a reprioritization of family and just looking for those quality experiences. So similar to some of the things that Molly mentioned, I would say that we did see some lengthening of, length of stay, depending on the circumstances. And that also kind of leads into this new way of work of what people like to call leisure, this blending of business and leisure travel. So as folks have gotten used to being able to work from anywhere, they have also chosen to okay, well, if I can work from anywhere, and I have to do this, I might as well go to the beach and maybe my family can be doing X, Y, and Z while I'm getting a couple hours of work in. And maybe that actually lets people get away more and hopefully longer than they did in the past. So I think that's one of the trends that we'll definitely see continuing. And then I guess one more that I would note is that in terms of that longer stays and, wanting your own space, certainly the choice of lodging options, including short-term rentals, I think is something that is definitely here to stay.
Rounding out here, I think from the small business perspective is what I'm going to focus on is we saw customers being more willing than ever to accept change as long as it was clearly communicated, right? You think about your daily life, maybe your interactions at your grocery store or at your favorite restaurant, which are all part of the tourism economy here in Vermont, changed drastically over the last couple of years. And what happened with that change is it caused a lot of small business owners to kind of pick their heads up out of the day-to-day because they're all so busy and say, let me evaluate my digital footprint. So great examples that we saw would be restaurants implementing online ordering. Just thinking in your head right now, how many of your restaurants that you love going to didn't offer online ordering beforehand and do now? And that is what I'll call an unfortunate surprise and delight that came out of the pandemic. Also led to more AI implementation, particularly at lodging properties. So chatbots are a good example where you reach out to a hotel or a lodging property or really any attraction with a question, and you're primed in this chat and they lead you through their customer service representative. So adding that AI and chat component and really clearly communicating with customers became prevalent, and we're seeing that continue still.
Great, and I know in our prep call, kind of to sum that all up, we called it that, and I think Nate, you said this, we jumped digitally 10 years in 15 months, in maybe 24 months, and so not sure if Vermont would have gotten there alone or it would have taken more time, but the pandemic and really the rallying of our small businesses and our accommodations and hospitality market really took advantage of that pandemic. I want to start with you, Amy, but we're not going to go straight through back. We're going to shift it up a little bit. Don't make it too easy on your moderator. But kind of on the heels of, lessons learned, and what are we taking away that we're going to keep with the pandemic in Vermont. Talk to me a little bit about what you see as the biggest opportunities in Vermont and for Vermont when it comes to the future of tourism. That's why we're all here. So what's the crystal ball? What are the big opportunities that you see?
And when we say crystal ball, I think we have to say murky crystal ball because there's still so many bumps in the road maybe that we might encounter. So murky crystal ball is how I'll characterize it.
Fair enough.
I think one of the differentiators of Vermont is that our attractions, our destinations really do offer an authentic experience, and that is what the traveling public is seeking out. When I look at trends that Vermont is well capitalized to take advantage of because it's part of our ethos anyways, would be sustainability in travel. And when I say sustainability, it's everything from sourcing from local farms all the way to maybe not daily housekeeping so that you're not washing as many towels. Just as two examples, I'll let my colleagues down the table in specific industries go into those details. But the second trend that I would say is a continuation of outdoor recreation, being in space, being a part of nature. We had a lot of, for example, a lot of New York City publications reaching out about forest bathing, which me as a Vermonter, I had never really thought about forest bathing because we spend so much time out in nature, but it's really taking the opportunity to just exist in nature and appreciate what's around you. And so really looking forward out of the pandemic, I think we'll see outdoor recreation continue to resonate, authentic experiences, and then sustainability, and being proud of that and making sure we're communicating that.
Great. I'll go to you, Molly, next.
I think I would concur with everything that Amy said. Those things were on my list as well. I would add generational travel. We're seeing a multi-generational travel, so grandparents traveling with their children and their grandchildren. We're certainly seeing that at ski areas, and I think we're well positioned to take advantage of that. I think, interest in the outdoors, again, is huge, and I think that's something that, will be enduring, and it's great to get more people out there that haven't partaken in the past, and those of us who live here in Vermont know how great it is, for our mental health and physical well-being to get outside, and so I think that positions us well. And then the fact that we are a day's drive from so many people, we're easy to get to, so you don't have to get on a plane, and it just makes travel here easy. So.
Okay. Nate, I'll go with you, and then I'll close with Commissioner.
Thank you. Yeah, I think like Heather was saying, I feel that Vermont is very well positioned in the future of tourism and outdoor recreation. We live so close to so many people, and the state lends itself to what I think people are really seeking out. Not overcrowded. Bennington is a great example. It's a beautiful corner of the state, and you have amazing assets around here with the Green Mountain National Forest, some great state parks, Harriman Reservoir, and you're close to Albany and close to Massachusetts. So I think this is just a nice little microcosm of the whole state. And what we have to offer, I think, is what people are seeking out. True, authentic experiences, wanting to be outdoors. Folks aren't going to be working as much, even the new employees that we have at the state parks. They're some of the most brightest, hardworking people we've ever had, but they're not going to be putting in 50, 60, 70 hours a week like others have in previous generations, and I think that's good for tourism in Vermont. And so folks, I think, will have a little more time for leisure, and then also work where they want to have some leisure time. We're hoping to increase the amount of folks that stay in our state parks and work from our state parks. We're trying to up our game with connectivity and broadband, Wi-Fi in the parks. And I think that's a big part of our future and increasing our midweek visitors. Let's see. Yeah, I think I'll turn it over to Heather.
I guess a lot of what I would add is just to sort of put an underline about some of the underline under some of the things that other folks have mentioned, that we see national trends talking about sustainability and ecotourism and wellness travel, and there's no stretch for Vermont to be there. So it's not as if we are trying to reinvent, or we would need to reinvent ourselves to acknowledge the trends. And the trends, in some senses, are kind of playing right into our hands, which is a wonderful position to be in. Not that we would ever want to sort of rest in our laurels that way, but it does just show, the opportunity that Vermont has to maintain and hopefully increase our market share, knowing that this is what people are looking for. And again, the theme of immersive experiences, of, discovery, of really people, we hear a lot about, putting the emphasis on the people versus just the attraction. And that's really about how, certainly in marketing as well, it's about a personalized approach. So, the next generation of travelers, or I would say all travelers, as we get more used to everything in the digital world being at our fingertips, is that, we're looking for that individual experience that speaks exactly to what we want. And again, I would say that not only is that a trend that we're seeing, but that Vermont is well positioned to be the solution to that problem, in the sense that, our people, our characters, that we don't have to try and be authentic. And I know that's something that all destinations strive for, but, I'm a firm believer that our modesty is actually an asset, that, we just do it because it's what we love, and that's really what visitors are looking for.
Great, and I want to connect some of those. Nate, you had mentioned, I love how you kind of framed up as an and statement. We're outdoors, we've got the woods, and we're also trying to get more connected. And I would say 5 years ago, some of us would have scoffed at that. How dare you put the internet into the woods? But we know we've got new generations coming in. We know we actually want to encourage work from the woods, right? Do your work and also have pleasure at the same time, if you're in a tent or if you're in a hotel or a lodging property. So really liking that. I think Heather punched it home with the personalization, right? We know travelers are becoming more customized, more personalized, and so what can we do to make and statements out of those what seem like diametrically opposed things. I think when I witness what we've done in Vermont over the last couple of years, it's been saying, no, they're not diametrically opposed. We can make and statements out of those. So,
Could I just add, that's really funny. If you could have been a fly on the wall, say 8 years ago, we were debating, do we really want Wi-Fi in the parks? I mean, do we want people on their screens in the parks? And now it's a standard amenity that folks need, and it's something we're striving for.
Great. Amy, you had mentioned this. I'm not going to start with you. I'm actually going to go back to Nate to begin with, but you had mentioned around sustainability, and I think we have to have a conversation about climate change when we do talk about authentic Vermont. I mean, we are known for our ski season. We are known for our foliage, as we're witnessing today, and yet, we look at the devastation that the rest of at least the country is going through as the climate changes around them. So I'll start with Nate, and maybe then go to Molly after this. When it comes to climate change, what is the impact that the ski industry, the recreation, the outdoor industry, foliage, the maple industry, what are we experiencing when we look at climate change and kind of project for us 5 to 10 years down the road for Vermont?
Yeah, we think a lot about this and talk quite a bit about it, particularly given our capital dollars are spread relatively thin around the state, in the state park system, capital improvements. But in many ways, we feel the state park system is pretty well positioned for adapting to climate change. And first and foremost, we want to do our part to limit our impact on the climate. But beyond that, we're concerned about water quality, more shade structures, planting more trees. The shoulder seasons will be changing, so we'll have a longer park season, and even during the winter, there'll be maybe a little less skiing. Not sure about that, but plenty of opportunity to get outdoors with some of the new technology like fat bikes, e-fat bikes. Folks are going to get us outdoors no matter what. But we're really focused on our waterfronts, making sure they're flood resilient, and trying to be sure we invest with a long view in mind. And that includes charging stations, electric cars, changing our fleet out so our equipment and vehicles are electric, making sure our buildings are as energy efficient as possible and run off renewables. So this is a big part of our planning, and in some ways it's hard to predict, but I feel like state parks are going to be playing a huge role in Vermont adapting to climate change.
Well, certainly climate change is a huge issue for the ski industry, and you know, a lot of people probably think it's just about cold and snow, and that's obviously a big part of it. But we're also, you know, in the volatility of weather that we're seeing. You know, just look at last night, all the rain that we got. You know, it's been dry for so long, and then we got all of this rain all at once. But, you know, think back to storms like Tropical Storm Irene, which obviously was a disaster, you know, a huge disaster for this state. But it also, you know, impacted the infrastructure at many of the mountain resorts as well. We're seeing, you know, more wind events, which, you know, that can make power transmission difficult. That can make it difficult to run lifts, you know, more lifts on wind hold, that type of thing. And so, you know, this has been something that the ski industry has been working on in terms of their own operations for many years. Efficiency Vermont has been a great partner for our industry, and I recently asked them to pull together some statistics, you know, just trying to quantify what the ski industry has done, and they have, we've done more than 720 projects in the last 20 years or so, which over their lifetime will save 968,000 metric tons of carbon emissions. So that's a huge number, and we're one of the few states that can really sort of quantify that. And I would say that because of being able to work with Efficiency Vermont, you know, the ski areas in Vermont are leaders in the industry in terms of sustainability. I often get asked by the media, so what's the ski industry doing to, you know, to solve climate change? And I kind of laugh because it's not that it's a funny thing at all, but you know, the ski industry is a microcosm of, you know, it's a huge global problem, and you know, the ski industry, I think, like I said, has been taking it seriously for several decades in terms of making their operations more sustainable, but it's really going to take, you know, a whole effort in the state, which we're moving in the right direction with the Global Warming Solutions Act that was passed a couple of years ago that is being implemented now. But it also, you know, the country as a whole, the globe as a whole, but certainly our country needs to be definitely more forward-thinking in terms of what we're doing to solve climate change, and that's really what it's going to take, that type of a scale to solve some of our issues. So, you know, we have, with the Inflation Reduction Act, there was, you know, some steps made, but we really need a lot more to happen at the federal level. And so we work, I have counterparts in ski states across the country, and we also have a National Ski Areas Association, and they are, you know, the lobbying effort with the federal government, with Congress. And so we certainly work with them and try to lend our voices to that plea whenever we can.
And then I'll just toss it up to either Commissioner or Amy if you have anything to add.
I guess the only thing I would add is it's just a different twist of that, just in terms of how climate change is just affecting people's decision-making. And so I would say that, you know, sitting in state government, you know, we are also extremely focused on our demographic challenges, and thus it's about, you know, relocation and what does that look like, encouraging folks to move here. One of the top reasons we hear when people want to move here, other than, you know, access to the outdoors and so forth, is climate change, is that they are moving away from areas that are more heavily impacted than we are here in Vermont. So, you know, as climate change plays out, it becomes an issue for us in terms of, you know, it's actually, we're on the receiving end of that, being able to benefit from the fact that people are looking for someplace safe to be.
Kind of echoing and expanding really on that, or probably just echoing more than anything, is people that know me know that I love data, so I always try to back back what I say with that. So a recent study done at the national level showed that 80% of travelers are looking for sustainable accommodations, and what that means varies across the scale, but that's the buzzword that people are looking for when they're booking their accommodations. And booking a lodging stay is the first intent to travel, and so that's a critical decision-making point, and also shows the tone of the trip that that traveler is trying to set. And so really what I think of when I think of the future of tourism is partners like the ski industry and the state park system, or really anyone in the tourism and hospitality space communicating sustainability efforts that they are making, whether it's cow-powered gondolas or, I know this is not the right term, but recycled water in the base lodges and the toilets, or whatever it may be. Any little steps that are made, I think, are important to tell the story about. So I think that's
Yeah. Great. I'm going to stick with you, Amy, for this next question, and then others if they want to weigh in. We've heard this other buzzword called agritourism. Can you just give us your definition of that, and where is that heading in the future, and then anybody else that wants to come in on that question?
Yeah, definitely. So thinking of agritourism, it's really the two words put together, agriculture and tourism. It's just the intersection of those two worlds. But it's a little bit more than that, because it's taking both the educational side of agriculture and then also the economic development side. And so I think a good way to tell the story of agritourism in the state of Vermont is talk about one of the pioneers that we have. Beth Kennett, who has a farm located in Rochester, Vermont, and she's a multi-generational farmer as well as her husband. They're part of the Cabot Co-op family. So they've been welcoming guests to their farm since 1984, approaching 40 years on that. So they welcome people for an overnight stay, family-style dining, mostly sourced from their local farm or other local farms, but they can also do farm chores, like feeding the barn cats, or helping to milk the cows, or being present during milking. So it's really immersing the traveling public into an agricultural experience. But there are also different types of agritourism that I'd be remiss if I didn't mention. So there's Farmcraft Vermont, as an example, that's located in Shelburne, where they grow and source a lot of their herbs, and you can make soaps in their kitchen. So there's a variety of agritourism experiences that you can do throughout the state, whether it's going to a farm, or maybe it's a new pick opportunity, or making a dinner with locally sourced food. There's just a lot of opportunity there, but it's the intersection of education and economic opportunity, and also recognizing that the dairy industry is really the backbone of the agriculture industry for the state of Vermont. So it's really tying it all together in a package. And the turning point for agritourism in the state of Vermont actually happened shortly after 1998. Beth Kennett and other agritourism and agriculture leaders from the state of Vermont actually traveled to Ireland with Senator Leahy so they could explore what could agritourism actually be in Vermont. And there's been an explosion really in the last 10 years of impact on that. So some anecdotes and some leaders in the state.
Great definition. Do others want to weigh in, even through kind of your lens, whether that be skiing, outdoor rec? Heather, you kind of have a holistic view of the whole market.
Yeah, I can certainly add to that. I think it is helpful to understand that some things that we've always done that were tourism experiences we're now calling agritourism. So like going to the apple orchard, or going on a hayride, or anything, going through a corn maze. So we kind of loop all that in together now, as well as with the farm stays and some of these more immersive experiences. I think that one of the things that's really I would put this in the category of huge opportunities for us is that not only are these the types of experiences that we've been talking about, these immersive experiences, hands-on, very personalized, that people are looking for, but they also offer this opportunity for the folks in our agricultural sector, our food and beverage producers and so forth, to have that extra supplemental income. So it's a win for the farmers who are diversifying what they can offer to the traveling public. And then it also has another benefit of helping people connect with where their food comes from, which again is something that folks are looking for. So it's a bit of a full circle there. And I guess just sort of on a conceptual level, I would also add that, in tourism and hospitality, we're always thinking about like how to make people feel welcome. Like, you know, you want to invite them into your home, and that's what a lot of these agritourism experiences really are about, is sort of sharing that. It's like sharing their home, sharing the fruits of their labor, sharing, you know, a meal together, some of the most sort of like primal experiences you can actually have with other folks, and so it becomes it becomes a more of an emotional type experience for folks to have.
I would just add more from a lodging perspective. You know, we have, Vermont State Park System has 2,200 campsites, and some of them are cottages or cabins, lean-tos. But our campgrounds are very busy, and they're even busy when there's events or things to do in the area. And a big part of that is agritourism and being able to go and participate and get that authentic experience at a local farm.
And I would just say, it's really important for people to know where their food comes from, right? It doesn't come from the grocery store. I mean, it does, but, you know, where does it really come from? And I think it's important for children to be exposed to that, and also some adults. The ski industry being part of the working landscape of the state, we are very supportive of the Working Lands Enterprise grants that help farms, forest products, you know, be able to, it grants them so that they can achieve projects to make their businesses better. And so we've been a supporter of that for several years. And then we also, part of our marketing partnerships, Cabot is our longest standing partner, and you know, one of their, when they first got started, they wanted to, as Roberta McDonald, who just recently retired from Cabot, likes to say, lobbing cheese at skiers, right? So we still continue that today. When we have a specialty food tour that we do at the different ski areas, and we work with different vendors, and then certainly Cabot, you know, supplies us with cheese so that we can get that out to folks. And you know, skiers love their Cabot cheese, so it must be working. But we, you know, we try to be supportive of some of the smaller producers and try to get them introduced to new customers in the ski areas.
If I could add one more thing, I was just seeing from my notes, I was just going to, if it helps to quantify it a little bit, there's an open farm week that happens, this is the 8th year that we had that, it happens in August, and there were over 50 farms throughout the state that opened themselves up to visitors during open farm week this year. And then in terms of partners, as Molly was mentioning, so we work very closely with Dig In, which is part of the Vermont Fresh Network, and that's the aggregation of information about where you can go to have all these type of experiences. There are 624 businesses listed on Dig In, so this encompasses a lot of what, you know, we think of as just the fabric of Vermont.
Great resource, so check that out. So we're going to do a little bit of a process check, and this is for our audience. We're going to give you, in a minute, I have one more question. We're about midway through our questions for the panel. I have one more for them, and then we want to just take a break and see if anybody has any questions at the current moment. We will have a Q&A at the end as well, so don't feel the pressure now, but I wanted to give you some time as they answer this last question before halftime to think if you have a question for our panelists. Again, you have another opportunity near the end as well. So, Commissioner Pelham, you had talked about really needing more people in Vermont, bringing more people to Vermont, creating a diverse workforce. Let's talk about some of that diverse visitor, either visiting Vermont or we want to visit Vermont. What are we doing in Vermont from your lens, from the state perspective, to draw in more diverse visitors into the state? And then kind of we'll open it up to the rest of the panel.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly one of our top priorities in terms of how do we not only help encourage the industry as a whole to create a welcoming experience for everyone who comes here, but making sure that in our outward-facing marketing efforts that we are also being intentional in that. I will say that, number one, the department now, for the first time, we actually have a DEI statement that we just recently crafted to make sure that we are articulating exactly what our commitment is. That obviously is just a statement, it's a place to start, but it helps us give a framework for making sure that we are trying to incorporate that in everything that we do. And just some of the sort of where we're trying to tackle that, I feel like with DEI, there's no place to start and there's no place to end. Like, there's so much work to do. It's really about looking at everything we do. So, curation of assets is sort of like one of the first places to start, is how are we actually visually representing the state, and how do we curate assets that not only showcase the diversity of visitors who we have here, we'd like to have here, but how we're able to do that in an authentic way. Because, again, the brand will always fall down if someone can see through and see if it's not speaking a truth to them. So we've been working this summer with the Vermont Outdoor Business Alliance and several other Vermont brands to work on some media projects where we are curating a diverse BIPOC individuals here in Vermont enjoying the outdoors and other activities, to work on that curation of assets. We also are partnering specific content creation opportunities where somebody wants to write a story about something, or again, providing funding mechanisms for that, also funding events. We funded the Black Experience 22 on June 19th this year, and we'll be working with them again this coming February. It was postponed for Black History Month in what year is it? 22. But it will go back to February next year, and they're really hoping to create this Black Experience 23 that will be just a central hub of so many events going around Black History Month that really would give us a way to talk about Vermont in a different way than we've traditionally done that. So it's about funding resources for creating assets and making sure that other folks are able to hold events that they would like to hold. It's also in terms of in our paid media decision making. We bring influencers here every year. The influencers that we're bringing here this summer are all persons of color. We also have an influencer coming here on the accessibility side, Curb Free with Corey Lee. He's a wheelchair user, and he was just here for a week and is actually creating an accessible guide to Vermont for us, working with Vermont Adaptive, who we work with quite frequently. We do a lot of sponsored content as one of the ways that we do advertising, so that's where we're working with a publisher to create a story about Vermont. And we've worked with the Edge Media Network for a couple of years now. They speak to an LGBTQ plus population. We've also worked with brands that are specific to Black travelers, Travel Noir and Melbourne Base Campus kind of thing. We've also recently joined Travel Unity, which is a nonprofit organization that is devoted to increasing diversity in travel. So we will be interested in just learning from them and working with them on what that means with other destinations who are also tackling the same thing. And actually they have a Northeast conference every year. We're hoping to maybe bring that to Vermont next year. And the last point that I had written down, I will also mention, is that we're also trying to encourage those folks that we work with to also be thinking about these questions. So we did receive funding in the last legislative session to do some regional marketing grants to partners around the state. And one of our criteria for receiving that funding was that the campaigns were looking to increase the diversity of visitors that they bring into the state. So we're trying to do it. We're trying to encourage our partners to do it, and we know there's a lot more we need to do.
Great. Do others want to weigh in on that? And kind of leave it up to you who goes first, but anybody?
Sure, I can go next. We started working on this as an association back in 2018, and one of the first things that we did was convene a focus group to speak with some skiers, some Black skiers at the time, just in terms of, what is the experience like for them, and what are some of the barriers, so that we can sort of have an understanding of what it's like from their, through their eyes, and try to put some understanding to that. So we did host a couple of those, and then we worked on a statement, and actually provided some guidance to our member resorts and ski areas along those lines. As Heather mentioned, we do quite a bit of work in reaching out to media and influencers, and we really put a focus on folks from communities that historically have not maybe visited Vermont or not partaken in winter sports, people that are interested in trying them, and we've been pretty successful with that. We just actually came back from New York City last Friday. Last Thursday night, we had our first in-person media event in 2 years, which was great. And although the numbers were smaller than what we've seen in past years, it was a more diverse crowd than ever, and I was really happy to see that. And we will be working with some of those folks to bring them to Vermont so that they can experience the mountains and the mountain lifestyle and the sports, and be able to talk to their audiences and their followers about their experiences, and really extend that welcome, because it's a really important thing. It's not only the right thing to do, but in terms of growing our business, it's critical to reach out to these communities and make them feel welcome.
I can jump in. On the state park side, we have some real champions amongst our staff in this area, and we rely a lot on partners. The Vermont Outdoor Business Alliance, they're doing some fantastic work. We work regularly with Vermont Center for Independent Living, so they're a great advisor. And also our own staff. Like I said, we bring in 450 seasonal employees every year, and we're working hard to diversify that staff and make sure folks know what the jobs are, and that they're welcome. Like Molly said, trying to learn and be enlightened on the perspective of other folks. Like Amy mentioned, forest path, and many of us growing up around here, good things happen in the forest. You go there to collect your thoughts, get some peace and quiet. For so many other folks, their history, the cultural history of them and their parents, good things don't happen in the forest, bad things happen in the forest. So we're really trying to learn rapidly and figure out ways that we can make sure folks are feeling welcome, and that we understand truthfully what it means to make folks feel welcome. We have another partner, the Vermont Parks Forever Foundation. They're a not-for-profit partner of ours, and their mission is to increase natural connections of folks coming to the state parks, helping us with our interpretive and education programs, and also improving access for underserved communities, new Americans, and folks that haven't had the advantage that many of us have had of visiting state parks and feeling welcome in the state forests, or open space, maybe in the communities. And we're realizing it's hard work. There's no easy answers. There's no end point. And the successes are incremental. Sometimes we miss some opportunities. Vermont Parks Forever, they worked with, I forget the name of the bus company, through some fundraising. There was a bus in Rutland that took folks from Rutland to Bombasine State Park on a couple weekends. And only 25 or 30 folks took advantage of that. But we saw that as a real success, because it's small and incremental, even though we hoped for more. So I'd say that's my main takeaway message right now, is it's hard work, and it just takes constant effort. You have to go out and seek opportunities. They don't come to you. And really understanding what it takes to make sure folks are feeling welcome.
And definitely echoing those sentiments. At the Vermont Chamber, we have been a partner organization for the Vermont Declaration of Inclusion, which is an effort that's been spearheaded by Al Wakefield, who's based in Rutland. The idea at the time, it was 251 towns. I think now it's technically 252 towns. But to get all towns in Vermont to sign on to this Declaration of Inclusion. And at the core, it's messaging that Vermont is a welcoming place that treats people with respect. There's more to it, but that's really in its summation there. But currently there are 69 towns that have signed on to this. in this immediate region, Bennington, Manchester. I'm going to read from here because I just want you to know, since you're mostly local, Pownell, Dorset, Paulet, and Mount Tabor, up a little bit in the corner there, have all signed on. And of the 69 towns that have signed on to the Declaration of Inclusion, that represents 48% of the population in the state of Vermont. So that's something we've been doing at the organization level.
Great. Thank you all. It's hard work and sometimes a tough conversation, so I really appreciate you being honest. At this point, I do want to pause, maybe stretch. We've been here for about 45, 50 minutes. Any questions so far for our panelists? Anything they just have to ask? Jean, go back.
So first I just want to say it's really exciting to hear what is happening at the state level and in all your various sectors. I want to go back to agritourism for a moment. I think it's nascent in this part of in Bennington County. But I'm wondering, how does it grow? So do you see agritourism, what you call agritourism, sort of traditional agritourism, as sort of a pocket of one farm or one institution deciding to do something, and then does it grow out to become a cluster, or does it sort of just pop wherever it happens? And also, sort of, if you can characterize where in the state you see it being most successful right now.
I can jump in to start with that. So I think one way you can think about it is a hub and spoke model, because you might have people that are looking for the immersive farm-stay experience, but it also ties into our local food culture, and that goes all the way out into our towns and neighborhoods, into our local restaurants. And so it's really an intricate web when we're looking at agritourism. It's everything from farm down to your local store. There is a restaurant in Brattleboro called Kai's Dim Sum, and they actually started as a tent in the Brattleboro Farmers Market. And their whole idea is that they only source what they can from local farms for their menu, and they've now grown into a full restaurant catering service. So that's one example of how agritourism can spread into the hospitality space. One example where I know there's a lot of agritourism activities would be in the Champlain Valley. So if you're looking in the, Virgins, Shelburne area, there's a lot of activity there, which, that's just due to the nature of the land, because a lot of that is farmland there.
Others? Elaine?
Yeah, I guess I would say that I think the challenge is really to help agricultural enterprises see this as a possibility. So I think there is definitely a level of education where it's like the traditional dairy farm, they're like, you really want to come in and get dirty and see, this? And it's also kind of understanding a lot of farmers that I've spoken to about this, it's a little bit of a disconnect because they're not necessarily customer service experts, or used to explaining what they do, or otherwise what does it mean to invite guests on your property. Molly and Amy are the policy experts here, but I can say that a couple of years ago there was legislation passed for limited liability for farms, so that if you did invite visitors on your farm, that you would be somewhat protected if something happens to them. Because there's just basically what it is, there's a whole set of new challenges that may come when you decide to open up your operations, whether it's a farm or whether it's, you're making soap or you're, baking bread or whatever it is that's, part of this food culture, as Amy said. So part of it is that level of education is like, what would this really mean if I were to invite guests here? And then I think a little bit of it is that, if you build it, they will come, but there may be a little bit of, is that really going to happen? Is that what people really want? So I also think that there's an opportunity for communities to really identify what is an agritourism. I mean, that's a term we're using now, but like I said, and you mentioned farmers markets, we've had farmers markets forever before we called them part of the agritourism ecosystem. So it's about how that communities can really recognize what are the assets within their realm that folks might be interested in, and then making sure that whether you're a lodging property and you're encouraging folks, when you take a hike, go to the farmer's market first, or if the, here at the museum, whether it's exhibits or it's, events or whatever it may be, what your sphere of influence is just thinking about like, well, how can we bring in that part of the community that is, based in agriculture? Because, agriculture, you mentioned this, Amy, the dairy industry as being really the backbone of the agriculture in Vermont. Not only is it a huge economic sector for us, but, agriculture is what created this amazing working landscape that we are then portraying ourselves, and it's so ingrained in how we look at Vermont and what I think it's why Vermont looks different. This is a fascination for me, for instance, from New Hampshire. We think like we should look the same, and we really, really don't. And it's because of our agricultural tradition. So I think helping, I don't know if I quite answered the question, I think Amy did too, but it's encouraging folks to really think about like, this is a way to help support agriculture in the state, which then supports some of the other things that we value.
Can I just add one thing too? There is a permitting side to this as well, and there's a study being done by the Natural Resources Board right now in terms of on-farm accessory businesses and how that plays with Act 250, because if you think about it, if you've got a farm and you've got visitors coming, it's traffic, and so making sure that that's what Act 250 is there to do. But I think the study will be looking at how can we make it easier perhaps for farms while still having some of that oversight to be able to have these accessory businesses or ancillary businesses that can help them help them be successful and stay farms.
Great. I have time for one more kind of question from the crowd, and again, we'll have another opportunity at the end. Yes?
Yeah, hi. I was having a bit of trouble phrasing the question. You've gotten at it in the diversity talk, which is there's the Vermont brand that's being marketed, and then there are the stories that visitors are being told at cultural institutions or that they're assembling for themselves from their experiences here. You seem to be thinking of both ends of it in the diversity population, but how about just ordinary tourists?
Yeah, I think that's really the heart of like what branding is, as much as, so for somebody who's trying to be a steward of the brand like we are, we're certainly trying to tell the stories about Vermont as we see it and to nurture that, but really what a brand is that culmination of experiences that people have with the brand that we have no control over. So that might be, they might, cross the Massachusetts line and stop at the Guilford Rest area, and that experience that they have there becomes part of what they associate with Vermont and with the Vermont brand. And so I try to encourage folks that we are all responsible for the Vermont brand. Every interaction that we have with, and the Vermont brand is its residents, it's not just visitors, it's what is that culture that we are creating, and the culture that we're creating with each other is then going to be, it's going to just exude out of us. It's like that's what we can then offer to our visitors. And so really thinking about, how we treat each other and what opportunities are here, that becomes part of the brand. And then every interaction that folks have with visitors becomes part of what they associate with Vermont. So we can do our best to shine a light on all the great stories that we want to tell, but if folks come here and either the stories we're telling don't relate to what the actual experience is, then we're going to fall down. But really, it's those experiences are the most powerful part of branding, not necessarily the advertising that we're going to put together. So that's the part of it that I always try to encourage everyone to feel like you have as much part in the strength of the Vermont brand as anything that any of us up here might be trying to do.
I think that absolutely, and I think that's why the work to bring folks here that they're storytellers and they can experience Vermont and tell that story through their own words. It's not, me telling people how, what their experience should be. It's inviting them up, helping them find their way around if that's what they want. But, so trying to be a catalyst in that way, but really helping them to be telling the story of Vermont through their eyes and to their audiences is an important piece of that as well. But you're right, I mean, we talk a lot about, training employees at our ski areas, but what happens if somebody has a bad experience at the gas station down the road, that we have absolutely no control over. So, and that's why, having this conversation more and more, hopefully more people will come to understand that and that they are part of that experience for folks, for our visitors.
Great. We're going to move on with some more questions. We've got about 5 more for the panelists, and then, like I said, we'll have some more time for some Q&A, so be thinking of some great questions. I'm going to start with you, Amy, and then we'll move down the row. We were talking about agritourism, we're talking about business and kind of economic prosperity. Where is that intersection? And you could probably leapfrog or bounce off of your agritourism, but where is the intersection between business, economic development, and tourism? I look out here, and many business owners are in this room tonight. Where do you see that being the intersection?
Yeah, I mean, as a champion for tourism in the state of Vermont, I always like to say that tourism is economic development because our state's economy is so dependent on a healthy and strong tourism industry. As Commissioner Pella mentioned, was almost $1 billion in losses due to the pandemic, which is staggering when you look at the size of our tiny state. But our tourism economy, just to put some numbers behind it so we know the volume that's moving through our state, there's approximately $3 billion in visitor spending, plus or minus depending on the given year, and over 30,000 jobs are associated with the tourism industry, and that's 10% of Vermont's workforce. And while it might not seem like a lot when you're like, oh, it's just 10%, but it's 30,000 people that are in the tourism and hospitality industry every single day. And when we look at the state's economy, tourism is the second highest contributor to the state's GDP next to manufacturing. And that seems staggering to some, because you might think, of course manufacturing's up there, maybe you would think it would be healthcare, but it's actually tourism that's the second highest contributor to our state's GDP. When we look at investments in tourism, whether it's ski areas, state parks, or asset development, or destination development, whatever it may be, it contributes to the economy because it's creating a stronger asset in our tourism realm. And it's really, tourism, I would say, is a catalyst for broader economic development and reinvestment in our communities.
Commissioner?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, and we need to take some of my talking points there with the great,
You talk a lot,
those the stats, and this concept that, I like to think it's like tourism is rural economic development. I mean, our state is so rural and it's so spread out, but tourism is unique in the fact that it touches every corner of the state. So it's not just that it's just our ski resorts, which are fabulous, or our state parks, but there's so many parts of the tourism industry that it really becomes important for almost every community out there. That oftentimes it's a couple different things. So the ski resorts, like oftentimes attractions like that are like the anchor employer in an industry, in a town. But then it's also, if somebody comes, let's say we have a lodging establishment who does destination weddings, which we know are exploding, folks come for that wedding, but then they go out for the day and they eat in the restaurants and they hire a photographer and they hire a florist. And so that sort of ripple effect of somebody may come for one experience, whether it be to go skiing or to go to a wedding, but they're still stopping at the store buying a sandwich or getting gas. And so that cumulative effect of tourism, I think sometimes some residents tend to kind of overlook that if they're not keyed into, if they're not thinking about their lodging establishment, for instance. But it's the folks coming to, the downtown stores. I definitely try to remind people that, if it wasn't for tourism and, these huge peak times like fall foliage, chances are it would be a lot harder for the restaurants that we all want to enjoy when it comes to be our anniversary or our birthday. They might not be there because they rely on that influx of out-of-state capital. I try and encourage folks to remember that the quality of life that we all enjoy and maybe take for granted. A lot of that is powered by out-of-state spending. And so understanding how we can come to terms with that and certainly manage that, but just to really see the power behind that.
I'll move on to the next one unless Molly or Nate have any.
I'll just quickly say that, with 2,200 campsites in the state park system, people who come and camp, they buy a lot of stuff. And they bring a lot of stuff. And I do the same thing when I go camping. It's not an easy thing necessarily. So the economic impact of state parks is very impressive. And folks really, wherever they go, or wherever they live, they want access to outdoor recreation and things to do. So the state parks, for example, or a trailhead or a ski area are often an anchoring component of a community or a place, a destination to visit.
I'm going to stick with you, Nate, for this next one, then we'll move through the rest of the panelists. We've talked a lot about opportunities in the future, and I want to switch gears and ask you about the challenges that you're seeing in the next coming years when we look at travel and tourism. And that will, go down the line again and ask each one of you and I kind of framed it up. What keeps you up at night? So Nate, what keeps you up at night that's specific to your job, and what are you concerned about with challenges?
Yeah, I like the way you framed that. Most of our parks are closing now, and our staffing has been a challenge, and I think going forward, staffing the parks the way we have traditionally staffed them is something that is going to be an ongoing challenge for the whole state and the tourism industry. We are marketing nationwide, recruiting nationwide for our staff. So bringing all those folks on, many of them from out of state, and then training them, sensitizing them to Vermont, getting people up to speed, because they really are faced with a lot of managing a park. So I think staffing is one, housing is another, a huge recruitment tool for our folks who come and work with us, is to be able to offer housing. And an incredible number of folks who come and work here from Pennsylvania, Georgia, Texas, they stay at least a couple of years, and some have stayed since they got here. I just want to put that plug in for our staff, because a big part of the future is attracting people to the state to live and work here. And having all of us be in a space where we can take the long view, I think that's a real challenge, whether it's in your personal lives, your business, or what we all work on up here on this panel. You're just faced with day-to-day challenges and want to get through the season and the day or the week. And thinking about Vermont and what is so precious about it, it's really our outdoor spaces and settings, and being able to take care of the environment in Vermont. And that takes some long view thinking and investment. So does housing. Fundamental building blocks like that do take a long-range view. It's going to be a challenge because there are so many immediate challenges also. And DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, that is something that I wish there was a way to move forward a little quicker than we are. But so that's going to be a challenge, but I love all the effort and thinking and learning that's going on in that space. So I'm encouraged about that, but it is going to be a challenge. And then adapting to climate, hotter summers, longer summers, shorter winters. I think we are well positioned in Vermont, but it's going to take some creative thinking, some investment, and some innovation to really make it work. But all in all, I'm feeling quite positive about tourism in the state, and very positive about the state park system.
Great. Well, that's a good segue to you, Molly. Challenges that you face as we enter ski season.
Yeah, we're getting there. Nate did a pretty good job of detailing many of them. Certainly housing is a big one, and we have kind of gotten to where we planned to be, and this did not happen overnight, and so we're turning things around, but it's going to take some time to figure out that housing. And I think one of the big challenges with that is, we're used to the way that our communities look, but if we are going to have, more housing located in downtowns, that's a change that's probably going to be difficult for people, but, just more density of our settlements, I think, will be important. And, Act 250 has been, it's a big reason that the state looks the way that it does. And, the legislature has been trying to figure out for the last several years how to modernize Act 250. And it's a difficult conversation because a lot of people are very interested in that. But I think it's going to be critical. I don't think that our current system is sustainable, so we are going to have to make some changes to the way Act 250 works. But I think that's going to be critical because, as Heather mentioned earlier, we're going to see an influx of people wanting to move here because of climate, and so we're going to need to figure that out if we want Vermont to stay looking like the state that we love. And that's certainly obviously a big attractor for tourism, and that's why people come here. So that's one of the things that I worry about is that the housing, childcare, staffing, all of those things kind of roll up, but it seems to go back to housing. When you move through these things like staffing, people want to come here and work, but where are they going to live? So it's kind of back to housing, and we're making some headway on that, but there's definitely more to do, and I think certainly at the local level is where that's going to come in, zoning bylaws and things like that.
Great. Amy?
I'll put the chamber economic lens on this one a little bit. So the best way I've heard someone put this is I have to give credit to Kevin Chu, who's the executive director of Vermont Futures Project, is that Vermont has a people problem. So pre-pandemic, we needed 10,000 people a year to move into our state. The pandemic has only exacerbated our people problem. Right now, we'll probably hit 16 months, but the latest report's at 15 months consecutively of 20,000 job openings in the state. So that just shows how much of a people problem we have. We have a truly shallow worker pool, and if we don't have people to fill the jobs in our state to welcome tourists, that's a recipe for disaster there. But then also what keeps me up at night is thinking about the economic turmoil that could happen in the tourism industry, because it is very susceptible to economic downturns. If there's a public health crisis, leisure spending is often one of the first things to go. So if we hit, a true recession, or by definition we might be in recession now, but if we hit a declared emergency in the economy, tourism is the first thing to get that hit. And so, while that does keep me up at night, I do have to put a positive spin on that as well, because it's just who I am, is just thinking about the resiliency of our small business community. Because while we did face a lot of losses with the pandemic, I was really impressed with the creative thinking, problem solving, and everybody's least favorite word now, pivoting, that our small business community did throughout the pandemic, really to still welcome people to Vermont. But again, I think it goes back to that people problem that we're facing.
And our closer.
Well, it's interesting. So I sit within the Agency of Commerce and Community Development, and it's housing, workforce. So clearly that's been covered, but I can't emphasize how intertwined that is with so many things we're talking about. And I think I would just sort of add to a little bit when we talk about, the small business. I think you're absolutely right, Amy, in terms of, sort of the, not fragility, but just the tourism, hospitality, leisure spending can be on the front lines when there is volatility. And, one of the places where, so I think there's, in terms of when we think about infrastructure, so I have concerns in terms of the sustainability of our infrastructure that we kind of touched on before, the reef for climate change and the people problem. We want to solve that people problem, but then, we want to be aware of over-tourism, which is happening if you think about out west at our national parks, when, this great pent-up demand for travel is amazing, but when everybody wants to be in the same place at the same time, that just doesn't work. And so, we want more folks to be here in the state and enjoying, but, And when it comes to scale, I mean, it's one of the things that we love about Vermont, and we talk about the benefits of being small scale, but a small scale may mean that there only are 6 parking spaces at that trailhead, so what happens when 30 people show up there? And, you know, I think about transportation issues, so not where are they gonna park at the trailhead, but, you know, if we want them to be in town and support our downtowns and our economic core, you know, what's public transportation infrastructure do we have to get them to the trailhead? And, you know, so it's supporting also that I consider all of our like small independent retailers and our restaurants part of our tourism infrastructure as well. So that gets back to this question of like, how are they supported if there is any fragility in the economic landscape. The one other thing that I would say that does keep me up at night is even though we are enjoying this, you know, pent-up demand for travel and folks are getting out again, we really have to protect our market share. One of the things that we saw coming out of the pandemic is that every destination everywhere was fighting for visitors to come back because we are not unique and alone in depending on the visitation, those visitation dollars. So in terms of as a state, we have tended to basically, we love the Vermont brand and we think it can stand on its own and people will always come to Vermont. But the fact of the matter is that if we are not able to at least keep up with the amount of people who are, you know, searching and fighting for those eyeballs to come here, we are going to see over time, you know, hopefully not, but the lessening of our market share. And just so when it comes to funding, you know, one of the things I just think is important for people to realize is that the Department of Tourism has traditionally had a budget of $3.5 million. That's been about the same for at least 10 years or so. Our closest neighbors, New Hampshire's budget is $10 million a year, and Maine's budget is $17 million a year. So we're not even talking about folks wanting to go out west or go out to Europe or go anywhere else. We're talking about folks who are already interested in coming to northern New England and being able to compete and make sure that they come to Vermont is something that definitely we are always focused on as well.
Great, thank you. And I'll add my own anecdotal to the challenges and what keeps me up at night. And I think it's part of the mosaic that you guys are talking about. Recently, we put a survey out to our members. We asked one little question, which said, do you plan to retire in 5 years? And 20% of our membership said yes. So when you start, and I'm looking out, and when you start to look at downtown Bennington, downtown Manchester, and the area, and you go into these stores, you kind of know that they're going to phase out in the next 5 to 10 years. And do we have a new generation of A, business owners, and B, that kind of continue to create the downtowns and mosaic that we want, right? Because we don't want those big box stores. We do want those small business owners, but we're going to have to create an attractive sell. And that's definitely what keeps me up and the chamber staff up is, okay, we've got potentially 20% of our membership, you know, happily retiring, hopefully. Who's coming in to buy that flower shop? Who's coming in to buy that bakery or turn it into something else? Just to add to some of your worries when you go to sleep at night.
No doom and gloom at all, ever.
Well, with that and hearing some of those challenges, and I'll again open this to all of you, we've heard this new term around destination development, and we've been poking at that quite a lot this tonight. But what does destination development mean, and destination even investment, and how does that help Vermont move forward? Maybe I'll start with you again, Amy, just from the business perspective, and then move down the line.
Yeah, when I think about it, I think about offerings and infrastructure. And to go with Commissioner Pelham's example on transportation to and from trailheads, I think about trail development and accessibility, and then also sustainability. So when we have, call them spaghetti bowls of mountain bike trails as an example popping up around the state, which is fantastic not only for the residents of Vermont, but also our visitors. In the town I live in Killington, we've seen it explode over the last 5 years, but you know, having the lens of working with partner organizations like Vermont Adaptive to make sure that our trails that we are building are accessible for people that are coming and they want to enjoy the trails. making sure that there's signage and wayfinding, or bringing people from the trailhead to the local business community, and really just wrapping it all together so that it's more than just a collection of amazing trails that we get to ride on our mountain bikes, but it's everything from transportation to parking to sustainability. With that is one thing I think of. And then the last plug I'll make, and I'm sure that Molly wants to talk about this too, is EV charging at hospitality businesses as a key infrastructure investment that's needed.
Great, let's go right down the line. Let's go Heather, Nate, Molly.
Yeah, I think that from where I sit in terms of destination development, I see this as a bit of a challenge for the industry. I sort of touched on it before in terms of how I think that, tourism in Vermont have been synonymous, but have we really looked deeply to say, like, what will it take to make sure that we do have a robust tourism industry going forward? And we've, all the things we've been talking about today kind of are part of that, but that's certainly something that the department is really looking at in terms of, how can we put all of these ideas and, be more deliberate about, like, what does the future of tourism look like in Vermont? What is a destination management plan for Vermont so that we can incorporate these ideas around transportation, around, funding in general, around, visitor services and access and so forth. We have the opportunity to take advantage of some funds that are coming to us from the Economic Development Administration, which was part of the American Rescue Plan Act. And we will be using a chunk of that money to do a destination development plan and some strategic planning about how do we tackle these problems around infrastructure, transportation and so forth. So that's my addition.
Yeah, that's very well said. I don't have a lot to add other than, connectivity is really important. If you go to a state park, or you're in downtown Bennington, what can you do and where can you go and how easy is it to get there? And ideally, there would be something for everyone and more to do than somebody can do, and they'll want to come back. So there's so many great businesses and opportunities and great things going on in the state. Connecting everybody is always a challenge, and those partnerships are really, really important. Some of our most popular state parks, you can walk one way and get a wilderness experience, walk the other way and go get a cup of coffee and a pizza and maybe, see a show or something. So I would say connecting, the connections and the transportation is really important.
Yes, I would agree with that. I mentioned earlier that I just got back from New York City, and I actually took Amtrak to get there out of Middlebury. I live up in the Mad River Valley, and so that was the closest station to me, and that was a great experience. It's a long train ride, but it's pretty relaxing. You don't have to go through security, and it takes you right into downtown, Midtown Manhattan, which is great. But on the other, putting my visitor hat on, if I'm going to take Amtrak to get up to Vermont, how do you get from the station to the ski area? That is not really a developed, and I know Killington had a program in place for a while, and I'm not sure that is still. But maybe it's just a pandemic thing, but so that's one of the things we've been talking to skiers. What's that?
Gramps shuttle.
Yeah, Gramps retired.
Oh,
Yeah,
Gramps.
so there you go. He retired. So. But that linkage for our visitors, because train travel is a fairly easy thing for folks coming out of the city to take advantage of. But how do they get there? And then the creation of trails. I think we've seen some great grants that have enabled that, but the stewardship of those trails and being able to take care of them when they do get a lot of wear and tear is, the sustainability of those trails and that asset is important. And certainly the linkage with downtowns, as folks have mentioned, and that wayfinding. The DEI initiatives and just making sure, as we mentioned before, making sure that everybody understands what what being welcoming is, because that's an important piece of it. And also businesses, I think, in their planning, making sure that they are, using the right imagery and being inclusive in their messaging when they're reaching out to people is really important. And then smart development and how we keep Vermont looking like Vermont is really important. And I think there's opportunities to do that.
Great. And we're rounding out our questions, but I've got a couple more for you, and then we'll pass it to the audience. A recent survey through a car sharing company called Avail found that 72% of Gen Z travelers, those are the people born between 1997 and 2012, or our 10-year-olds to 25-year-olds, are looking to spend big on leisure travel this coming year. This puts them actually ahead of millennials. Millennials, 70% of them said they'd spend big on travel. Gen Xers said 67%, and baby boomers, 61% said they'd spend big. In general, that kind of frames up my question around, with a new generation of travelers, millennial, Gen Z, you might even hear alpha generation coming up, is Vermont positioned to be a top destination? And feel free to weave in craft beer in any of your response to that. But maybe we'll start with you again, Amy, and then if you want to add to that, we can, or we can move on to the next questions.
Yeah, I would say the summation is yes, we are well positioned to take advantage of any generation that wants to come to travel to Vermont. And that's really because of the diversity of experiences that we do offer. I mean, you can have a great night at a lean-to in Island Pond and listen to the loons, which is one of my favorite camping places. And you can do that on a budget, or you could go to Twin Farms in Barnard for a more, we'll call it, exclusive experience if you want that kind of offering. So we have the full scale here, but at the core, what these travelers are looking for is that authentic experience, which we deliver through and through. And what's coming true, especially with travelers right now, is they're willing to pay more for a better customer experience. And so we're starting to see hospitality businesses, particularly on the lodging and restaurant side, are really primed and ready to take advantage of that. I mean, you look at our top tier farm to table restaurants like Hen of the Wood and Waterbury and Burlington, but again, craft beer, distillers, wineries, I would say our offerings and the quality of those offerings are ready to compete with anyone that wants to come here.
Great. Anybody want to add to that one?
Well, I would just say, destination weddings are one of the great marketing things. I mean, thankfully, people are still getting married, and Vermont is a very attractive place to get married. And when you think about couples choosing Vermont and bringing their friends and family up to Vermont, maybe some of those folks have never been to Vermont before, so it's a great introduction. If they're here for a weekend, they'll hopefully love it and want to come back. So that's certainly, as we're thinking about younger generations coming up, a great way for them to be introduced to the state, maybe through some of their friends too.
Great, thank you.
Actually, I could add to that too. On that level, I would say the strength of our higher education system. We are an importer of young folks, and if they are able to build that affinity with Vermont after coming to school here, certainly we understand that a lot of them leave again, but if they have that attachment established at that age, then hopefully they will consider to come back here to get married, to come back here to go on vacation, to relocate here. So, I think just knowing the strength of that part of our state is actually goes hand in hand with nurturing future tourists.
Great.
Yeah, we're just seeing that generation, they love technology. They expect it, but they also love to camp. They love the outdoors, and they love experiences more than just buying stuff.
Great. This is for kind of all of us to consider, and feel free to self-promote here. How can we support you here in Bennington in the roles that you serve?
I mean, I could start there. One of the things that I say often is that we don't know what we don't know. And so we are trying to market the whole state, but we are not experts on every corner of the state. So the more that we can work with any given community to understand, how is it that you can articulate what experiences you can have here in Bennington that you can't have anywhere else. Just feeding that information to us, to making sure we know about your events, making sure we know of any new businesses or anything that has changed. If you're just having that give and take, like let us help you back and forth is really, I can't stress that enough. And would be happy to, connect with folks in terms of how that actually works, to be able to come down, anyone from our staff can come down and do an event, and kind of talk about all the different ways where, we might be able to support what you're doing here in Bennington. And then, again, we drive traffic to VermontVacation.com. That's our forward-facing, retail website. So to make sure that you are listed on, if any business is here, to make sure you are listed in the business directory, because, when we get this funding, that's where we're pushing people to. That's their first introduction to Vermont sometimes, so making sure that your community and your business are well represented on the business directory, which is a partnership with the Chamber, as well as our events calendar is also one great place to start.
Great. Other ways we can support you.
I really like what you said, Heather, and I think for the state park system, we really want to hear from you here in Bennington. What's working, what's not working, what you have going on. Definitely reach out and let us know. Like I said, many of our park managers are temporary employees, so it's really hard for them to get really engaged in the community. But overall, we really want to hear how we can help you, whether it's some grant ideas or event ideas. And I would say just get to know your parks in the area so you can speak to them and speak about them and direct folks to them.
I would just add being welcoming. You're right here tucked into, just above the Massachusetts border and just next to the New York border. So again, just welcoming people to the state and helping them to enjoy everything that you have here, and certainly if they're passing through, sending them on their way with maybe information.
Just echoing what everyone else said, community conversations are just critically important to the work that we do, whether it's on, writing an article for the statewide magazine, or with my advocacy hat on, talking to partners like Matt. We have a very open line of communication, but hearing from the individuals in the room is, what's impacting you as a small business or as an individual in the community really helps us inform our policy agenda. A good example that I put there is our relationship that we have with Vermont Independent Restaurants. We always say that they make us smarter because we know what solutions they need, whether it's in training, education, marketing, or advocacy. So community conversations either with, those of us that work statewide or with your chamber champions like Matt are just so critically important, and we value the work that's done at the local level.
Great. And I'll add, we often try and make sure from at least the chamber level, but many of you know your own representatives, your own senators. These conversations that we're having up here when Commissioner Pelham talks about our budget compared to our closest competitors, those are things to think about. I know Heather and her team have been both modest in their ask and also trying to find, there's only so much money to go around, and we don't want to take it away from education, we don't want to take it away from healthcare, but at the same time, if I could make a plug, I think it's about supporting our tourism. You've learned tonight how important that is, not only to travelers, not only to the tourism sector, but how much that influence and impacts Vermont throughout. I mean, the GDP alone was kind of amazing when you shared that, Amy. So thank you, and speak with your representatives and senators when it does come time to vote and share your local concerns as well. So with that, I'm going to ask the panelists just one more time, anything we haven't mentioned, something that's been, been a burning desire to mention to this group, and then I do want to pass it to all of you for any questions.
Yes, I would just add, a plug for Heather and her team. With her experience in building her team, when it comes to speaking with legislators, it's all about the data and the numbers, right? And so, how can we prove that the money we're investing in tourism is coming back? And, that's been a hard conversation to have, but I think, Heather has made some great inroads in terms of being able to put actual numbers and results to the spend that, she and her team are making. And it's often difficult to quantify that, because if you're a business and you're doing marketing, you're getting inquiries back directly to you. And that happens to some degree at the state level, but, you know, people might come to the state website and go directly to, you know, an individual property. So, you know, Heather may not even know that that person, you know, the work that she and her team have driven that person, you know, to come to Vermont. So it is a little bit tricky in that regard, but I think, you know, she has really taken that to heart and really done a great job, and is continuing to do a great job with trying to really quantify what that means.
Thank you, Molly. Appreciate the vote of confidence, but it's true. It's, you know, what you point out is that, you know, we're not in charge of that final sale. So, you know, a retail store can say, well, you know, we did this marketing and this many people bought this product. Well, we're at the very top of the funnel as we talk about it. We're about, you know, ideas of planting a seed and the idea of Vermont, but you know, there's a lot of other steps down the funnel that we're not necessarily involved in before somebody finally decides to make that lodging reservation and then to come here. But we do try very hard to talk about return on ad spend and all of those metrics and those conversions and all the marketing speak and you know, performance measures, and it's not lip service. I mean, it's very true. Like, it helps us do our job as much as it helps us to articulate our role in helping support, you know, communities through the work that we do.
We will now open up to any final questions you have for the panelists. We'll start here with Martha, and then we'll go to...
Okay, so I have a lot of questions, but I'm going to try to hit the two that are kind of striking me right now. I was wondering, because I've seen, like, we've had some refugees from Afghanistan that I've seen here locally in Bennington, and in fact, I just kind of, by happenstance, befriended one. And I was wondering if there is a push for finding employment and housing for refugees, and as business owners, is there a connection point for us if we are trying to kind of participate in that? Because if we're talking about our staffing shortages, there's this well, and diversity as well, you know, that kind of hits a lot of those points. So I'm kind of wondering about that. And yeah, so I'll just stop there.
Yeah, I mean, the Refugee Resettlement Program would be the first place to start in terms of either finding support services or understanding what's happening here locally. That's run out of, well, that's a separate nonprofit, but I think most of that work usually happens with the Agency of Human Services. But I think it's a great point in the sense that, you know, how we solve our demographic challenges as like a big picture, like there's many solutions to that. And so whether it's, and this question of like, is Vermont welcoming or not, and you know, how can we be more welcoming? And that part about being on all of us. It's really recognizing, so here's, you know, an amazing opportunity. You know, we have these folks who are starting a brand new life. You know, what can we do to make them feel like they are part of the community, that we want to be part of the community, and that becomes, you know, that second slash maybe first home someday. So I think it's really, on the state level, there are certain organizations that specialize in that, but I think on the community level, it's, you know, you mentioned community conversations. I would just take that more broadly. It's really about, let's make sure that there are all these different opportunities to say, like, how can these folks get involved? How do they make sure that they know about the state parks nearby? You know, do they have skills that really would be helpful to another business, that a little bit of matchmaking type work? Or there are definitely communities throughout the state who are standing up welcome wagon type programs, which are, you know, back in vogue again. And it really is about a little bit of that, you know, new residents, you know, being partnered with existing residents to kind of break through the Vermont mystique, and also, you know, like, well, how do you get through winter? Or, you know, where is, you know, the nearest grocery store that might have foods that I'm used to?
I mean, I think a good example, like there's the efforts with the Welcome Wagon, but then also communities like Rutland as an example. They have a concierge service that you can connect new residents with, and so they try to help plug individuals into social channels. So it's not a one-size-fits-all offering, but again, refugee resettlement at the state level is a great place to start for resources. that might have a broad net to plug people into.
Matt, can I just?
Yes,
Um,
yep.
There is, so Bennington County Open Arms
Yeah,
is
that's what I was
the local resettlement organization, and it is under the umbrella of ECDC, which is Ethiopian Community Development Council, which is the local resettlement group. But I can connect you with some people afterwards for employment information.
Great, thank you, Jeannie. And Martha, hold on to those questions if we kind of get around and you have more. I saw Tyler's hand, and then I'll go to PJ next. Yeah.
I thought, I haven't heard the word maple mentioned at all. Isn't there some concern about the future of the maple industry?
Matt, can you repeat?
Yep, we hadn't heard mention of maple in 2 hours in Vermont, and we're concerned about it. So would the panelists talk about the maple industry and its future as well? A review, and I don't think it's going anywhere, so.
I'm not a forester. I'll let Nate speak to that part of it. I would say that maple fits into this conversation we're having about agritourism. So in that sense, visiting sugar houses, maple open house weekends, these are the type of experiences that we definitely plug as being part of the experiences you can have here in Vermont. I think the other thing that I like to talk about when we talk about maple is thank you, maple, for fall foliage. That's why Vermont looks like it does this time of year, is thanks to, our amazing maple trees. So I think it just has that sweet spot in our hearts, because it is about, it just, again, this time of year, it's so iconic for Vermont. And on a state level, besides the agritourism part of it, I would also say that there's a lot of emphasis on helping people understand that maple's not just for breakfast, and that it's a great ingredient to use in baking and cocktails and all sorts of other things. So I think there's a lot of interesting things happening in the maple industry, and I think it's a great touch point. I think for people and it's a great thing to bring home. So it's a reminder of Vermont in your kitchen.
Yeah, I think the maple industry in Vermont it's a big part of our future, and it's going to evolve. We're going to be tapping probably a wider variety of trees. Traditionally, it's sugar maple, but we'll probably be tapping more red maple. And some of the technology that's out there insulates the sugars from the fluctuations in the temperature somewhat. So it's going to evolve, but I think it's a big part of our future.
I would just add that the Agency of Agriculture has really, as Heather alluded to, is focusing on not just spring for thinking about maple, but really this time of year too, taking advantage of all the folks we have coming here to enjoy the foliage, making sure to promote maple at this time of year with the holidays coming up in terms of baking and cocktails and the things that she mentioned as well, which was one of the things that, it's kind of one of those duh moments, oh yeah, of course. It's not just about the spring for maple, it can be really a year-round thing.
Great. PJ?
This is probably for Amy and Heather. I manage the Welcome Center here in Bennington, the State Welcome Center. And one of the pieces, besides the map, the thing that we used to give out the most was your inspiration piece. You used to have a visitor guide, and now the last couple of years, and I know it's because of COVID, has been an inspiration piece. In your older ones, you had in the back a resource guide. It was so helpful getting people around the state because you listed covered bridges and waterfalls and golf courses and ski areas, which was so valuable to us because being here in Bennington, if someone wanted to play golf in the Northeast Kingdom, we had the resource right there. It takes much longer to get online to try to find these places for people. Do you see that coming back? I know that advertising had a lot to do with it.
It actually wasn't advertising at all that had to do with it. It was paper supply. So we print hundreds of thousands of magazines when we do the run for the Inspiration Guide, and there simply wasn't enough paper to print the volume of magazines that we needed to distribute not only in-state as well as out-of-state. So what we did strategically is print 2 runs of the magazine. So I actually talked to Jody not too long ago. There's a new run that's coming out, and there's not as much of a paper supply issue, so there is a section of resources added back in. So it really never had anything to do with ad sales.
Yeah.
It was there wasn't enough paper, because interestingly, paper production shifted over to corrugated cardboard, and they didn't anticipate the resurgence of print to happen so quickly. And so when that happened, that caused a supply chain issue with paper, on top of rising gas prices, which caused the leading producer of paper not to ship outside of 300 miles of their warehouse, which Vermont happens to be. So it was kind of a perfect storm of many incidences, but the resources are back, and we have paper again.
Thank you, because we have a meeting every week, a Zoom meeting of all of the managers of all of the welcome centers. And the most important piece to all of the welcome centers, and I hate to say this, you can take the rest of the magazine, but give us the resources, because that's what...
Maybe the state wants to do just the resources.
If you can only have so much paper, please do that, because that's what we all want.
They say the same thing about our maps and the area guides, so don't worry. And I thought we'd get out of here without mentioning supply chain, but apparently
Sorry.
that was the last word of the day. That we were,
Where's the bingo?
I was just going to say, in order to promote tourism in Vermont, stop shopping online.
in the back as well, I think that's, yeah.
So you're talking about people retiring, businesses requiring, and there's big industry, big businesses, and there's small businesses, and especially for, and I'm going to count myself in that, even though I'm computer savvy, the generation of people who are running some of the smaller businesses, the overwhelming influx of, well, advertise here, well, this area guide we have to pay for, and well, we're members of Vermont Attractions, so that takes care of some things, but then we want to be in the Inspiration Guide, and we want to be in this association, and trying to manage which ones are going to be the best, or which ones exist, can be overwhelming. And is there any consideration for consultants? I know there was something in the COVID funding that you could get somebody to come in to work with you. I'm not sure how that all managed, but a way to help, especially the older generation, to sort through some of that and figure out how they can allocate their resources and which things are best for their kind of business.
Like I said, I'll have 2 points there. I am not one to tell people how they have to spend their money. Obviously, I believe in what we do, but one of the biggest trends that has come out of the pandemic is, one, there's a move back to print for all generations because they want something that's tangible, and it's also seen as more reliable versus an online asset sometimes. But along with that, there's also been a move towards people seeking out official. So the official Shire's Guide, the official state guide, whatever it is, the official version of it, because it has more validity in their minds. It's kind of like that buzz connection there that people do have with that. And it was the On the Fly program, I think that you're referencing. It was a suite of technical services that was offered to hospitality, like tourism and hospitality businesses throughout the state.
And I think there's also a Red to grant as well, which was $3,000 to $5,000 that you could invest in specialties, specialty skill, technical skills. And I think that, and I'll kind of echo Denise, we've heard good feedback on programs like that just give the small business the access while also honoring the person giving the knowledge. And so those were great things that came out of the COVID pandemic. Some of those still exist. I think they just ran out of the Red to funds, but they might be replenishing them in the near future. But others that want to add to?
I guess I would put in a plug for your local chamber in terms of not feeling like you have to be an expert in all things. It's just a really leaning on your community in terms of what expertise might be there as opposed to paid consulting. It is always a little bit different. Every business has different challenges. But, as Amy's saying, like there may be some core pieces to take advantage of the fact that, because I would say it's like, leverage your money where, that piece is going to get the most distribution. So the Shires Guide, the state guide that goes to the welcome centers. And then really, I would encourage you, I guess the tricky thing with resources is not always just financial, but it's also time. Because there are a lot of free things you can do that aren't about the cost of it, but it's about the time to do it. So whether that's, again, making sure that you have a good presence on the business directory, letting us know what's new and so forth, or if you feel comfortable on social media, or, again, working with the chamber, or just making sure that you're just part of that conversation that everybody else is having, because it is overwhelming for any one individual business or attraction to try and get people to focus on them. But the more that you're tapped into what's happening, like I would say, like farther up the chain with the region or the state, then hopefully we can funnel people to you, so you don't have to feel like you have to get everyone's attention on your own.
Time for about one more question. We'll go with Doris again. You.
Oh, okay. I just wanted to add one more factor, as Ty was saying, that Maple wasn't mentioned. Specifically named were cultural institutions, of which we have 4 major Vermont cultural institutions in Bennington County, which contribute to the economy and also to the telling of the story. So if any comments on that would be great.
I mean, I will say that you're right, we didn't mention it by name, but in terms of when we are talking about the stories of Vermont, the cultural activities that are available is definitely always within, food and beverage, cultural activities, outdoor recreation. It's a core brand pillar for us. But I would also put that in the category of, it's really important for communities themselves to identify, the gems in the community to make sure that we know what's going on. There's been some really interesting collaborations recently that I would encourage folks to kind of get inspiration from, in terms of if the museum's doing something that then can be paired with a local business, that then can be paired with like a lodging property, putting packages together, really thinking about this idea that we're not competing against each other. It's really how can we make a critical mass that people just can't ignore. So that would be my answer to that, is really kind of leaning in there to make sure that we understand exactly why, again, so much should come to Bennington County and all that there is to do here, and how you then as a community can come together and say, like, when we got you, boy, are we gonna give you an experience you're not gonna forget.
I think going with that, something I think of is, we use the blanket term tourism and hospitality, and cultural attractions are certainly a part of that. It's not an aside, and so much so that, in the magazine this year that we did, every region has their own section and a couple of articles, and we highlighted, cultural heritage attractions not to miss in southern Vermont as an example, or in other articles we've talked about the African American Heritage Trail that has a stop at Hildene as the southernmost stop on that trail. So it's definitely a core part of our conversation, and also acknowledge that often the majority of traffic that comes through a museum or cultural institution in the state of Vermont is from visitors versus locals. But we always want to make sure it's our local students that are going through, and our residents. A lot of it is really driven by the visitor economy.
And actually, they're gonna, something else that hasn't come up yet tonight, but itinerary development is huge for us. Like people love listicles, they want to be spoon-fed exactly where should I go and what should I do. So I think as a community and as a region, putting together itineraries that include your cultural institutions, as well as, the food and drink, the outdoor rec, that's smattering, or, again, 5 places not to miss in Bennington County if you love art, or 5 places not to miss if you love this or that, and so forth, and just making it really accessible to people, so that if they find their way to either Vermont Vacation or to, the Shires Visitor's Guide or so forth, that it's right there for them, and they don't have to try and piece together like, oh, what's going on here or there. The more you can package that together, make it easier for people to find, you can really make some inroads there.
And you'll be happy to know in your Shires Guide this year we have itineraries that were donated by a local writer. Yes, we'll do the best we can while we can do it. Yes, Maggie, I see your hand kind of going up a little bit
No,
there in the back.
I just wanted to make a comment about, you were talking about creating more diversity and reaching out to these people, whomever they may be, to make Vermont more diversified. They have to be, in their mind, they have to feel that they're being sought after, not an afterthought. So if you can approach a person with that idea, that you are being sought after, you're not an afterthought. That was just one of my thoughts.
Thank you. And I'll add, not to that, because Maggie, I think you said it so pointedly, but the thing we haven't talked about just being Benningtonians too is how much we rely on interstate everything, really. But even when I think of art country, which includes, I believe, this museum, but it starts in the Berkshires and comes up this way. So I would also encourage the state and others to be thinking, places like Bennington, places like Brattleboro, really do rely on that partnership from state to state. And I often kind of sell this area as the extension of the Berkshires into the Shires when we talk about art, culture, food. A huge food corridor coming right up through Lee, Lenox, all the way up to Manchester. So just in future planning, I think kind of stronger together. And we are this kind of, New England is a very small spot when you look at Texas or California. So more partnerships we could put in there as well. All right, with that, folks, I do want to honor your time and honor our panelists' time. Let's give them a round of applause. That was